Punishing Jund and Riley Curran with elves.
Yeah, Riley Curran actually winning a Star City Legacy Open in Columbus very recently. He was also playing elves at that tournament, and Brian's been doing very well with this Punishing Fire build of Jund. We saw a Punishing Jund deck earlier today, but it was pretty different. Where the earlier deck we saw had Lotus Cobra and Natural Order to fetch out Progenitus, this deck is more typical with 4 Dark Confidant and a bit more removal and direct damage and Lightning Bolt. So playing a little more fair, but you know, it's also hard to call Dark Confidant completely fair. We see a fetch land lead from Brian.
The world where Dark Confidant is a fair card is an amusing world indeed. Brian Braun-Duin leads open with Deathrite Shaman. Riley Curran, his list, he also has 4 Deathrite Shamans in it. And how did he make room for this in his elf combo deck? It looks to me like he shaved a lot of things, but only 1 Birchlore Ranger, only 3 Quirion Rangers, only 1 Priest of Titania, and very curious to see how quickly this game is going to be over. Elves fully capable of ending the game in an incredibly fast pace. Deathrite Shaman from Riley Curran as well, as these 2 elves face off. A lot of people don't realize this is an elf.
Yeah, and we see a card that interacts pretty well with elves. I believe a Heritage Druid in Riley's hand, along with a Glimpse of Nature, which for just 1 mana is going to allow Riley to draw a card for each creature that he plays. You're going to see that fetch land removed by Deathrite Shaman, and that along with the Badlands is going to use the Punishing Fire to get rid of Deathrite, the Deathrite Shaman on Riley's side. Grove of the Burn Willows comes down, that's going to allow that Punishing Fire to be rebought. This, you know, it's bad for the Elves player. They can certainly deploy a really big force in 1 turn with Glimpse of Nature, but for Brian getting his Punishing Fire online this early, it's got to feel pretty good.
One of the things that can happen to an elf deck, it needs to establish itself on the table. So an Umezawa's Jitte with counters on it can just spell end of the game, and Punishing Fire and Grove of the Burn Willows is not as devastating as Umezawa's Jitte, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah, it serves a similar purpose, you know, a recursive way to kill whatever Riley's deploying. Really everything in his deck is vulnerable to that Punishing Fire, so Brian is going to have pretty free reign over Riley's creatures, it would seem. We're going to see a Hymn to Torok here, and because of that Deathrite Shaman being active and having 2 fetch lands in the graveyard, Brian is still going to have mana for a Punishing Fire should he need to do that on Riley's turn. We see a Green Sun Zenith and a Gaia's Cradle discarded at random by that hymn. Leaving Riley with that Heritage Druid, Glimpse of Nature, and what looks to be a couple other elves. I see a Lightning Bolt from Brian and that Punishing Fire that he'd returned earlier. And a draw of another Heritage Druid for Riley.
One of the things I really like about Brian Braun-Duin's deck, if you look at the creatures, you might think that you took a Time Warp. Bloodbraid Elf, Tarmogoyf, Dark Confidant, wow. On the spell side of things, Liliana of the Veil, Thoughtseize, Lightning Bolt, and I'm going to skip some of these cards, but then you see that it's a Legacy deck, that Hymn to Turok, that Punishing Fire, that Deathrite Shaman obviously was not back in time, but it's just really a neat mishmash of old and new all at once.
Yeah, it's a deck that really came together with the printing of Abrupt Decay and the better positioning that the red spells had. We see a Quirion Dryad come down here for Riley, looking to build a bit of a presence, although opening him up to Punishing Fire. Now we're going to see a Green Sun Zenith, shuffled back in, searching out.
Let's find out which 1-drop he'll drop.
Looks like we're going to see a good old Llanowar Elf.
War on all.
And Riley's deployed a couple creatures here. They can be taken down by Punishing Fire if Brian chooses to do that, and it looks like he's going to take out the Dryad.
The Dryad is gone.
it's a rough spot for Riley where he does need to develop, but he knows Brian's got that punishing fire.
Returns the fire, almost certainly. There it is. Dead Elf.
Grove of the Burn Willows, adding a red or green mana at the cost of making your opponent gain 1 life. In this case, it triggers Punishing Fire's ability. You can immediately spend that red mana to return Punishing Fire, a nice little combo that you see in Legacy.
Now a Wasteland adding insult to injury. Riley Curran in a lot of trouble here.
See, Verdant Catacombs come down to rebuild a bit. And card drawn for Brian, a Graven Cairns. So he's got a couple of future shifted lands in play. Another land for Riley.
Riley unable to establish any presence versus that Punishing Fire, and Braun-Duin having enough mana right now that if he wanted to, he could kill 2 creatures at will.
Yep, he can cast that Punishing Fire, return it, and then cast it again.
And Braun-Duin at the end of turn is going to eat one of the... It looks like the... Can't tell what that card is. The glare of the foil, making it hard to read.
It looks like a Green Sun Zenith that may have been discarded to
the Hymn to Torok
earlier.
Yeah.
Normally that's not a card you see in the graveyard.
And Braun-Duin getting in a free 1 point of damage, giving Riley Curran 1 life with the Grove of the Burn Willows, returning the Punishing Fire, and then recasting it.
We see a Verdant Catacombs continuing to build Brian's mana base, just allowing him to cast that Punishing Fire more, easier without having to activate the Deathrite Shaman.
Braun-Duin there on the left, in strong control of this game, lays a Bloodbright Elf. Let us see what happens in the Cascade. A Tarmogoyf. In for 3. The clock that Braun-Duin has here, very potent.
Yeah, and we'll see if Riley has an answer here. Good cards in hand. We'll see if they're good enough. And fetch land activation. Goes and grabs a Dryad Arbor. And we're going to see Deathrite Shaman removing that land, making a red mana. Lightning Bolt's going to take out the Arbor there. I imagine there's some reason he wanted the 1/1 body instead of a forest. Not quite sure myself, though. We're going to see an Elvish Visionary here add to the board and replace itself in Riley's hand.
I see a glimpse of nature now in Riley Curran's hand. At the end of the turn, Braun-Duin gives Riley Curran 1 life to return that Punishing Fire to Brian's hand.
Yeah, Riley's had that glimpse of nature for most of this game, been holding on to it, waiting till he can fire it off and really get a lot of cards off of it. Hasn't been in that position yet, though. Really locked down by that Punishing Fire.
And the whole team comes in. He does not believe he's going to have the mana to make use of the Deathrite Shaman in a efficient manner, so it just comes in for 1.
And we see Tarmogoyf's power and toughness added to the table. And Riley draws. Let's see if he... Yep, and he does finally cast that Glimpse of Nature that's been in his hand most of the game. We see a Heritage Druid come down, triggering Glimpse of Nature, draws a card. Very good draw in Gaia's Cradle. Only going to add 1 mana here. We'll see which one he chooses to go with. He goes with another Heritage Druid to draw another card. And I think that's where the chain is going to end, seeing that Brian could return that Punishing Fire, cast it, and then on his turn return it and cast it again, clearing out both those Heritage Druids and undoing all the work that Riley'd done. Riley saw the writing on the wall and
packed it up, packed it in.
1. Yep.
Now, Riley Curran, in terms of answers to Punishing Fire, because his opponent is playing 4, count them, 4 Punishing Fires, his answers include 1 Scavenging Ooze that he can Green Sun Zenith for in the sideboard. Stop.
He has the So one interesting thing, there's the Deathrite Shamans and the Scavenging Ooze, but neither of those are great answers because they both die to Punishing Fire.
Yep.
So if you've got the Punishing Fire in hand, and your opponent plays that against Punishing Fire, it's likely going to be the first thing that dies.
Yep. Now, the thing about Scavenging Ooze, the Scavenging Ooze might be able to take it out because the triggered ability of the returning of Punishing Fire, when it's triggered by Grove of Burnwillows, is a very effective way to respond to it, but the Ooze can just reactivate to re-eat the Punishing Fire. So...
yeah, if Riley has enough mana, he can probably fight through that and get rid of the Punishing Fire. And if he's able to remove any creatures with it, chances are some creatures will be dying in this matchup. He can bring that Scavenging Ooze out of Punishing Fire range as well. So a much more solid answer to Punishing Fire than Deathrite Shaman.
I would be really shocked if Deathrite Shaman was ever able to get rid of a Punishing Fire, because not only does Braun-Duin have the Punishing Fire, which can eat a Deathrite Shaman before there's an opportunity for that to be used, but he also has other removal spells that he can use first. So, yeah, I would be really surprised if a Deathrite Shaman is an actual effective use against Punishing Fire. I mean, it exists, but I feel like it would only work if Braun-Duin was like, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, only if he's okay with it happening. We see in Brian's sideboard, not a ton of options. Obstinate Baloth as a 2-of, probably not coming in. Nile Spellbomb to fight. Anything in the graveyard, also not really something we're going to see come in. He does have 3 Mindbreak traps, and Riley is probably going to cast a lot of spells on the turn that he goes off. The problem is, no one spell that Riley is going to cast is really all important. He can finish with a Regal Force or a Craterhoof Behemoth, and sure, Mindbreak trapping those is nice, but it's not going to save you if there's 10 or 15 elves on the board already.
I mean, if you get to the point where you have that many elves in play, just looking at Braun-Duin's deck, I don't believe that there's anything that he can do against Riley just going, here's everything. Here's my whole deck. I think his only response that he can use to win is somehow actually outright killing Riley Curran dead that turn. Now, sideboard-wise also, Sylvan Library in the board, his life total is either going to all go away at once or he's going to win. So Sylvan Library could be a card he could use to great effect just to get more and more ways to disrupt Riley.
Could be. He has to be a little careful with it because Riley might play out those creatures and could get a little tricky, but usually he's going to be okay spending that life.
Oh, yeah.
Get some more removal spells.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just thinking, I wouldn't mind cutting Tarmogoyfs, for example, to get a Sylvan Library, because you're going to kill Riley Curran based on tearing up their deck. And you don't need to kill them with the Tarmogoyf. That's just incidental.
Yeah, taking out his hand, using all your removal to take care of his creatures in play. In general, I think Brian's list is pretty well positioned here against this sort of creature combo deck, but he is a more fair deck playing against a combo deck, so there's always the chance that we'll see a really explosive start from Riley and something that Brian won't be able to come back from, but turn 1...
Green Sun Zenith gets a Dryad Arbor. That's a Zenith for 0, fetching the 0 casting cost 1/1 green creature known as Dryad Arbor.
We see on Brian's in Brian's hand there's a Badlands, a Grove of the Burnwillows, and quite a few spells, it looks like.
Riley Curran, he might not have the hand for it right now, but he's fully capable of winning on this turn, depending on what his hand looks like.
Yep, Elvish Visionary, looks like a Nettle Sentinel, an Abrupt Decay. So a few elves. I don't see a Glimpse of Nature. Wouldn't be surprised if we just saw this. Yep, Elvish Visionary come down, add a little bit of presence to the board, add an elf, cycle itself, give Riley more options, without really committing him because it replaces itself.
And he found that land with the Visionary.
Yep, and we're going to see Nettle Sentinel come out here too. So Riley developing pretty well. We'll see if Brian has removal to answer this start from
I don't believe that he
Riley.
does. The only removal he could have there is a bolt, and I'm sure he would have bolted that Dryad Arbor rather than let it live. But now he's at the 2-mana mark where all kinds of removal comes online.
Yeah, he does appear to have an Abrupt Decay, which could be used on the Nettle Sentinel, but maybe saved for something more that enables the combo more, something like a Heritage Druid, for example. So we'll see what Riley can do this turn. We see a Natural Order in his hand that he's moved to the front. We see that Heritage Druid that I just mentioned coming down. And actually, if Brian doesn't respond to this, the Heritage Druid is going to allow Riley to make 3 mana, 4, 5, cast Natural Order, and does he have Progenitus? He has one in his sideboard. I wouldn't be surprised if he brought that in.
I believe it's a very that's a part of his plan against a deck like this, is to just dodge and be like, you know what, I'm going to be this other deck because I don't know that I can beat you being what I normally am.
Yeah, and it's vulnerable to Liliana of the Veil, but that's 4 cards in Brian's deck, and if he doesn't have Liliana, not a lot of ways he's going to be able to race a 10/10 protection from everything.
For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with Ben Hayes. We're watching Riley Curran try to come back after that Game 1 just devastation that Braun-Duin visited upon him. And it looks like he's on his way. He's got a Progenitus in play. He's got 3 other creatures that he can use as a means to keep the Progenitus alive from a card like Liliana of the Veil. And with Braun-Duin not having access to a card like Perish, I think this game is over.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we could see from Braun-Duin except a real slew of removal spells here into a Liliana, and even that would require Riley not to have any follow-up creatures, which is unlikely in a deck with, a whole column of creatures on the deck list.
Yeah. Now, like, what Braun-Duin needs is to be able to kill 2 creatures right now, and then follow up with a removal and a Liliana of the Veil, and have the mana for all that, and have Riley Curran not draw a creature.
Yep, so we're going to see that Nettle Sentinel go away, the first step to the sequence we were talking about. It's going to be...
That means he's not going to be able to do it, actually. That's not enough. He
Well, he has 2 turns here.
That's fair. He does have 2 turns.
The Progenitus will drop him to 7. We could see something. That Wasteland has the ability to take out Dryad Arbor, leaving Riley with 1 less creature to sacrifice. He does choose to make that play, and we see another Abrupt Decay in his hand, so in Brian's hand.
I would actually have killed that Visionary now, just to make that Gaia's Cradle a little bit less powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely a play to consider. We see the Abrupt Decay coming out here. Riley with 3 cards in hand.
Wow, there's the opportunity.
Passes the
Liliana
turn,
of the Veil or no.
And it wasn't drawn, but I do see a Liliana of the Veil, I believe, at the back of his hand.
Boom!
And Riley may... Oh, yeah. I think Riley has a second Dryad Arbor here that he's going to get. Yeah, he does.
He does. He has a second Dryad Arbor in his sideboard. Wow.
So Verdant Catacombs saves Progenitus there and allows Riley to deal the full 20 damage with his protection from everything Hydra.
Talk about a plan, right? Riley knew that it was unlikely for him to be able to be a regular combo deck. He put in this other combo, the Natural Order part of the combo. But besides that, he's still able to be that first Elves combo. He also sideboards in a extra Dryad Arbor, not only for the ability to protect his Progenitus against a a sacrifice outlet, but also just have 1 more land in the deck against an opponent that might be able to destroy his mana. Really good plan from Riley Curran. Going on to Game 3 and see what's going to happen. Riley Curran going to be on the draw here, which is a really big boon to Braun-Duin's removal package.
Yeah, being able to get out ahead of the early development of Riley is, I think, going to be pretty important. Riley with a ton of 1-drops, so including even Green Sun Zenith, as we saw in that game, used to fetch a Dryad Arbor. Being on the play is very important for him because it's likely he'll be able to do something relevant with that turn and get ahead and, as we saw in that game, stay ahead. So Brian's definitely happy about being on the play. And we'll see if Punishing Fire can get rid of a bunch of elves, or if we see maybe a Glimpse combo off, or possibly something like that Progenitus again.
Right. Now, if you're just joining us, Braun-Duin was the recipient of a savage Progenitus beatdown. This Elves combo deck sideboarding in Natural Order Progenitus to have a second path to victory. The first game, Riley Curran being, I'll say, quote, just, end quote, an Elf combo deck. All it took was Punishing Fire and some bolts, and he was not able to muster any kind of combo. Now we're going to go to Game 3 and see which one of these players can take it down.
Yeah, I think Punishing Fire is going to be super important in this matchup. If Brian can get it online early, like he did in Game 1, that just sets Riley back so far. And in Brian's hand, I think I see a Grove and a red spell that looks like might be a burn spell. We see a Thoughtseize laying out Green Sun Zenith, Quirion Dryad, 2 fetch lands for Riley, a Gaia's Cradle, an Elvish Visionary, and what I think is a Birchlore Ranger also, right? Yep, Birchlore Ranger under that Elvish Visionary. So, decent hand for Riley. Maybe a little land heavy, but not something he minds having if he needs to fetch up those non-basics. And they're vulnerable to Wasteland, as is that Gaia's Cradle.
And still contemplating which one of these cards to go for. This is actually a hard call. And it looks like the Singleton Birchlore Ranger in the... What? Maybe not.
No?
Okay, Green Sun Zenith. That makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, so the card that Riley could have used to accelerate himself there by doing the same thing he did in Game 2, casting it for X equals 0 and fetching out Dryad Arbor. Brian is not interested in letting Riley do that again. So we see instead Quirion Ranger come down.
Quirion Ranger is one of the best elves in the elf deck, if you ask me. And it's also just one of the best elves of all time. It's just such a great card. You can use the Quirion Ranger once a turn, return a forest to your hand to untap a creature. It sounds innocuous, but it's a really powerful creature in Magic, and it goes all the way back to its early printing when, I'm going to use a name from the past, Kathy Nikoloff used a Quirion Ranger-based 5-color green deck to win the Florida Regionals a long, long time ago.
And we see that Quirion Ranger we were just talking about getting taken out by Abrupt Decay, replaced by an Elvish Visionary, which will draw a card for Riley. I believe he picked up a land, so he's got a decent number of spells left in hand, but Brian's had a start that he's probably pleased with. Thoughtseize, Abrupt Decay, Liliana. Really good curve, takes out that elf, and Brian's set up pretty well, although the elf combo deck can always come out of nowhere. Riley looking at a handful of cards.
A lot of land in Riley's hand.
Yeah, the elf deck generally wanting to build up a mass of elves in this case, to be able to go off, to be able to use Natural Order and Glimpse of Nature well. You see a Birchlore Ranger come down and the turn pass back. Can't see what's in Brian's hand. I think I see a Wasteland and a Fetch Land. We're going to see a +1 on Liliana. Fetch Land gets discarded from Brian, and I think a Fetch Land was also discarded from Riley.
I love the Abrupt Decays in the sideboard for this elf deck. It has so many potential uses, but right here we're going to see it being able to take out that Liliana should Riley want to.
Yeah, he may choose to do that. I think, as we actually saw happening in Standard a lot yesterday, people would play Liliana, use the sacrifice effect, she would go down to 1, and then the opponent would choose not to take the Liliana out. Take the Liliana out with a creature, it gets ticked up, but the player who chose not to kill it doesn't really mind discarding a card. So they're sort of trying to get some value out of that, then they take it out later when it really becomes a threat, when it has the ability to edict again. And we do see that happen. We see the Liliana taken out by that Abrupt Decay from Riley. Looks like another land drawn. I believe Riley has 2 Gaia's Cradle and that, Green Sun Zenith getting shuffled back in, fetching out an Elvish Visionary. Riley just hoping to draw something to propel him into this game. Gaia's Cradle being a legendary land, the 2 copies of it that I think are in Riley's hand, not ideal.
He's got 3 copies in his deck. It's important enough in terms of how much mana it provides that he's willing to put that many lands that are legendary of the same name into his deck.
Yep. And we may see him bringing out that Gaia's Cradle, hoping that it eats up a Wasteland activation, just to get the Wasteland off the table, take Brian down to 3 mana, because he does have that replacement in hand. And what are we going to see from Brian? Just a Tarmogoyf and fetch land and pass. So Tarmogoyf facing down Elvish Visionary, and wow,
oh boy,
Riley draws Natural Order.
Boom.
Off the top, and down comes Progenitus. Brian Braun-Duin drawing a little bit slim here. 3 Lilianas left in his deck. Cracks his fingers, ready to draw one off the top. He has a couple turns.
Draw.
And that, I think that was a Liliana. Brian looks
Really?
a little shocked.
Really? Oh my goodness. Let's find out. Look at
just
that
a little
smile. No cards in hand.
Yep.
Liliana off the top.
Natural
oh, my
Order
God.
off the top into Liliana off the top.
That's magic.
One top deck into another.
Some people can't handle Legacy. The swings.
Yeah, yeah, the whole game just swung right back and forth in 2 draw steps, and that 4/5 Tarmogoyf gets in and represents a very respectable clock. And now Riley, I believe, left with just that Gaia's Cradle in hand. So even if he does draw a Natural Order, not going to have a creature to sacrifice to it. And we see Riley draws something that he's thinking about. Adds a Verdant Catacombs to the board, just passes back. 5/6 Tarmogoyf, actually. And I don't think life totals are exactly correct, but we'll see. We'll see if they're updated shortly.
Poor Riley. Look at that hand. Him to Turok.
Him and,
Goodbye. Never mind hand.
Brian is going to get to see 2 Gaia's Cradles get discarded.
Riley's like, you got me. Here we go. Let's fight it out.
Good-natured about it, losing the 2 copies of a legendary land he already has in play. 5 damage in from the Tarmogoyf. Liliana, neither player discards.
Riley, end of turn, fetching a Dryad Arbor. He certainly wishes he could have had that in play when that Liliana came off the top.
And the Wasteland immediately takes care of that Dryad Arbor. Brian Braun-Duin not interested in a Natural Order being drawn again, and having that Dryad Arbor sacrificed to it. He does have a Liliana to edict whatever comes out, but you know, it may not be a Progenitus. It may be something else. And Riley draws.
Passes it over. Hand is done. That is the game. Wow. Look at the smiles, though. Riley's like, he knows he top-decked into having the potential to just crush that game. So he knows it was going to be potentially a theft. And then Brian Braun-Duin, not to be outdone, same thing. Rips a Liliana off the top. Riley Curran loses his Progenitus. What an awesome sequence of turns.
Yeah, just steals it right back and giving that Liliana a little kiss after the match.
That's awesome. I really, really love Magic. And, you know, Legacy is one of those formats that makes it so clear why Magic can be so much fun.